after she died, my brother, who's now dearly departed, he was the executor of her estate. Like I said, he was struggling all his life with alcohol and with all kinds of issues. But Lisa and I came home from our cabin in Canada one fall, and I looked in the basement, and there was this bag in the basement that didn't belong there because it was from J.C. Penney, and we'd never bought anything from J.C. Penney. I said, "Why is this J.C. Penney bag doing in the basement?" And I picked it up, and it had my mother in it. I came from a family that was, somewhat alcoholic and negative, and my father was John Birch Society Republican, very biased, very bigoted. He was a rocket scientist, and I have great respect for my father. He was an amazing, aeronautical engineer who actually majorly helped get men to the moon. He was a big part of the space program, so I have great respect for his intellect. But as a person, he needed some help.
Okay. So that's interesting, because coming from a family with alcoholism, you would be more prone to being a person who wants control. That's a more common result.
I guess so. You would know more about that than I. But
Yeah.
I know that both of my brothers, because they didn't study psychology and they didn't try to find out what was the deal with their upbringing and how they were dealing with the world, they both died early of alcoholism and lifestyle problems that they had. So I'm trying to avoid that, and have been all my life, by trying to figure out just what happened when we were growing up and how that could over time affect my outlook on the world, and also my ability to succeed in the world.
Absolutely. That's interesting. So are you the youngest?
I am the youngest, yeah. Yeah.
So you just kind of observed, you watched as you were growing up and said, doesn't feel right to me here. What is going on? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, that's why I studied psychology. I wanted to figure out, what was going on. And is there a way to think differently about the world? I mean, for example, I was kind of dumb as a box of hammers when I was in elementary school and middle school. Like, I found a report card of mine not long ago that was in an old envelope. It was like D, C minus F. I was like, okay. That was like 6th grade or something like that. But anyway, I transferred from the school I was going to in Pasadena to a boarding school. But in order to do that, because I was so stupid, I had to go to a summer camp an academic summer camp, when I was 15 in New Hampshire. And I went to this academic summer camp, and I started spouting off a lot of the stuff that, was kind of just normal discussion and talk in Pasadena, where I grew up, which was very conservative and very bigoted. And so I was just, and this camp counselor heard me saying this horrible stuff, just racist stuff. And he took me behind the tent and beat the shit out of me and said, "No, that's not what life is all about. This is what it's about." And over the course of the summer in this summer camp, he taught me what it was like to actually understand that life was not about all the stuff that I've been hearing around the dinner table as I was growing up, but that it was much more inclusive, put it that way, and that I could be come from an entirely different point of view that was much more inclusive. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that was the ultimate rewiring.
Well, I've always wondered I wonder what that guy is. I mean, I remember what he looked like.
Oh, what was his name? Do you remember?
I don't remember his name, but maybe it might have been Tom. That comes to my mind.
What's the name of the school?
It was called the Wolfboro Camp
Oh, the camp.
on Lake Winnipesaukee or something like that.
In like approximately year what?
Well, it would have been 1966.
Okay, so maybe there's will hear the name of the camp, plus
Yeah,
the
you never
year,
know.
plus possibly Tom.
Yeah, it was a camp it was called Rust Pond was the name of the little pond that we had campus on. But yeah, no, the guy, without that guy, without him taking me aside at that moment and really roughing me up and telling me that, I would not be the person I am today, without question.
Oh, I really wish he knew.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he does know, because he would notice you becoming famous.
Maybe.
He would have seen you.
If
You may have not seen him.
Who knows? I don't know. But there are a few people in my life who had major impacts on my life. If I could find them today, I would say, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who else?
Well, there was it's a long story. I don't know. But
We have time. It's a podcast.
I wrote this book years ago called Full Frontal Nudity, which is the first book that I wrote, which is it was a kind of romp about the first 25 years of my life. There's no mention of the film business in the book. But I was inspired to write the book because I was denied access to Canada when I was going to do a show there, because word of my arrest in 1970 had finally made it into the computer system in Canada, and I was arrested on a felony charge, even though I was convicted on a misdemeanor charge of possession of drugs. I was like 18. I was still wearing like penny loafers from boarding school, and somebody said to me, I was living in this fraternity house, and my upperclassmen gave me some pills to take to USC to sell for $100. During exam time, they were speed, because you like to do your exams. We always took a little speed in exam time. I think they were called White Crosses or something, little Dexedrine tablets. I got busted. The cops found it, and I went to jail for it, for having these pills that the upperclassmen had given me to sell. I still don't know what they were, but anyway, I was arrested, and I was a court date was set, and the district attorney, like I said, it's a long story. The district attorney at the time in San Francisco was a friend of the judge that I was going to go in front of, and he made a deal with the judge that I would only be charged ultimately and convicted of possession of prescription drugs without a prescription, which was just a slap in the hand misdemeanor with no jail time and a little bit of probation. Right. This deal was all set up, and I went to court the day of it, and I had this big drug lawyer in San Francisco, a guy named Michael Stepanian, who at the time was like the big drug lawyer, and he was doing my case pro bono because my girlfriend at the time had screamed out in court on my arraignment, "Is there a lawyer in the house? Is there a lawyer?" And this guy said, "I'm a lawyer," and he ended up taking my case for nothing.
That's cool.
Yeah, and he was the biggest lawyer. He represented David Crosby and a lot of people like that. And he made this deal between the DA and the judge that I would go into court and I would just get a slap on the wrist, right? So I get to court the day of that, and I look up, and the judge that was supposed to be there is not there. This female judge, Mrs. Judge Miller, is not there, and there's a guy named Judge Delarios sitting there, and my lawyer's nowhere to be seen. And all of a sudden, my name is going to come up in the docket. I don't have my lawyer with me. It's not the judge that made the deal. The DA is nowhere in sight. And suddenly, this young kid runs in out of breath, and he sits down next to me. He goes, "You Harry Hamlin?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, listen, Mike Stepanian got called to Alaska last night because one of his big clients got arrested. And he had to go to Alaska, Anchorage, and so I'm here, and I don't really know much about your case, but, and he looks up and he sees this judge, and he goes, "Oh my God, where's Judge Miller? Judge Miller should be here, because she's the person we did the deal with." And he said, "This guy, Delarios, he's the hanging judge, and so my name comes up, and I'm supposed to plead guilty, right? And the judge says, "How do you plead?" And I said, "Guilty." And he looks down at the rap sheet and he goes, "Well, Mr. Hamlin, I see that you have had every opportunity in life, and you've thrown it away. And I don't like to see that in my courtroom. And so I'm going to make an example of you, and I'm sentencing you to 3 years in the federal penitentiary.
Oh, wow.
And I had, hardly anything with me at all. But this guy just said, threw the book at me. And I heard this. I'm sitting there. I hear this. 3 years in the, what is that? Wait a minute. Deal? I was supposed to just get probation. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, all of a sudden, my mind is reeling from this. And this kid looks over at me and he looks at the judge and he says, "Excuse me, Your Honor, but you can't do that because Mr. Hamlin teaches underprivileged children 3 times a week math and English, and he's an asset to the community." And the judge looks down at him and looks at me and he asked me to stand up. He said, "Mr. Hamlin, is this true?" And the kid is like kicking me under the table, right? Like, say something, do something, right? And I said, "Well, yes, Your Honor, it is true." And of course, it's not true at all. I mean, this is completely untrue, right? I do not teach underprivileged children 3 times a week. And he said, "Where do you do this?" And I just said, "Well, at the Episcopal Church in Claremont."
Oh, that was fast thinking.
Okay, so there must be an Episcopal church in Claremont, right, somewhere. And he goes,
"You passed it somewhere."
And he said, "Would that be All Saints?" And I said, "Yes, All Saints." And he goes, "Oh," and then he said, so the kid, the judge finally said, "Well, in that case, I'm going to reduce your sentence to 1 year in the county jail, and I'm going to suspend all but 18 days so that you can go out and teach your kids." So it went from 3 years in the federal penitentiary to 1 year in the county jail, all but 18 days suspended. And this all took place over 5 minutes with this young kid, right?
Yeah.
And I've always thought, if I could just find that young guy, because he saved my bacon, right? And when I wrote the book that I was telling you about, Full Frontal Nudity, I found Michael. I called him up, Michael Sipani. He was still alive. I got him on the phone, and I said, "Do you remember my case?" "No, I don't remember your case." "Do you remember who you had as like clerks or, young associates back in 1970, 71? "No, I don't remember." So I never found the guy, but he's another person that I would like to find him.
He has got to have, I feel like he has got to have seen your success and know, look what, everybody knows who you are. They did know, as soon as you were, right? So I feel like he knows.
Well, I mean, Stepanian, the lawyer, when I called him up, he didn't know. He didn't
That's
remember
surprising.
me. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yes. I do feel like also you have to know also that there are people who you probably impacted in a strong way as well. And you'll never know either because most people don't have a chance to thank people later. And especially because we look back and realize how pivotal those people were. And we may sense a little bit in the moment, but it's really later when we really can see how powerful they were. And it's too bad because if only we knew.
That's true.
What we had done for other people.
I mean, people say, say one line and it resonates in your head and it can affect the way you make decisions 30 years later.
Absolutely. So is there another person you're thinking of that you wish you could tell? Anybody else in your...
That's still alive? No. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of them, but those are a couple of big ones.
Okay, so can we get back to your childhood just for a minute?
Okay.
Do you mind?
I'm good with that. It's a long time ago.
Yeah. So it made you interested in psychology. You didn't drink ever, or did you have a period of time where you did?
No, I have gone through periods of time when I have used alcohol. Yeah, and too much at times too, but I don't now. Yeah.
So have you
never?
realized
I mean, never to the point of anything like what my brothers were like. No, never got anywhere near that.
So you saw that right off the bat, where they were drinking
I mean, they couldn't
early?
go out to dinner without, they'd have to be helped out of the restaurant at the end of the night. Yeah.
And how about your mother?
She was just a homebody. She drank her dinner. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she was a special kind of case. Yeah. Spent some time on that one.
Let's spend some time on that.
Well, come on. Do we really? Okay.
It's interesting, I think, people's experiences.
Yeah, well, she and I never really got along that well, particularly after, high school. that period, yeah, it was. We didn't get along. Yeah.
What was the problem?
That I spent years and years with my head on a pillow, talking to people like you, trying to figure that out. What was the problem? Competition, I think. She was competitive with her children in some way. I don't know. I don't know. Whatever the problem was more her problem than mine. She had issues that she were unresolved. That had she been had some of the tools that are available to us now in terms of trying to figure out our lives were available to her then, which they were not. Really, what was available to her was a bottle of Bombay gin. That's how she dealt with it. And in the book that I wrote, I sort of outlined her daily progression of intake, which started in the morning with. This is another sort of a long story, but in the late 50s, early 60s, a guy named Dr. Max Jacobson had come over from Germany after the war, and he was peddling a concoction which he called his vitamin therapy, which was an injectable vitamin concoction that he turned Marilyn Monroe onto it and a lot of Hollywood types onto it, and she ended up turning Kennedy onto it, John Kennedy. So John Kennedy was shooting himself up with this stuff on a pretty much a daily basis. And when Kennedy said we're going to get a man on the moon within the next decade, he went to all of the people in the space program and he said, this concoction needs to be given to everyone high up in the space program. So my father began receiving on a weekly basis these little bottles of this vitamin therapy stuff that he would shoot himself up with every morning before he went to work. Turned out it was methadone. And my mother used to shoot herself up with that, and she called it her hangover juice. So my dad would shoot her up with that in the morning when she first woke up. Then she would take, at about 10 a.m., she would take a couple of Dexedrine tablets, and then at about noon she would take a couple of Emprin codeine tablets, and then she'd start drinking around 4:30 in the afternoon, and then at night, just before she went to sleep, after drinking a quarter of a bottle of gin, she would take 2 Secanols, which was little red capsule things, and that was her daily routine for years and years and years and years. So probably she wasn't even there in my childhood,
God, that's serious business right there. That's a lot. That's
this guy Jacobson ended up, his license was revoked. He almost went to jail. There's a whole book about it called Dr. Feelgood, about how Kennedy thought that the reason he beat Nixon in the debate, the first televised debate, was because he shot himself up with this stuff right before the debate. And also he shot himself up with it just before he had a big meeting with Khrushchev, I think somewhere in Europe. And he actually flew Jacobson over from the U.S., knowing that he was going to have this meeting with Khrushchev so that he could get shot up before the meeting.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Anyways,
wow.
So I wrote it in the book about it, and I did this show Mad Men for AMC years and years later.
Love.
And Matt Weiner's wife read my book just as I was coming on the show, and he ended up writing a whole scene in Mad Men about me, my character, making everybody in the office shoot themselves up with this concoction, because it was right around the same time that was taking place in Mad Men,
Same era.
Same era. So yeah.
That's so interesting. I'm sure I saw it, but I didn't remember that. That's so interesting. I mean, that's wild.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
Yeah. So did you fight like cats and dogs kind of things, no? So you just felt unloved, maybe?
Well, I just felt, never knowing what it was going to be like walking into the house, and at night my father and mother fought every night. So it was more my mother fighting my dad. My dad never fought back. He just listened to her ranting and raving, and then he would go to bed. But
Right. So you had different struggles with each parent.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know, you could call them struggles. I don't know. I mean, I got through it. I lived through it.
Right. But it's interesting what you said with your head on a pillow. The one thing that's really most important to learn, like you won't necessarily know what the problem was, but it was her problem, not you. Right? That's ultimately, that's the big epiphany.
Yeah, of course. I mean, exactly. I mean, as kids, we think we must have been the problem.
Yes.
But when, after she died, my brother, who's now dearly departed, he was the executor of her estate. And like I said, he was struggling all his life with alcohol and with all kinds of issues. But Lisa and I came home from our cabin in Canada one fall, and I looked in the basement, and there was this bag in the basement that didn't belong there because it was from J.C. Penney, and we'd never bought anything from J.C. Penney. I said, "Why is this J.C. Penney bag doing in the basement?" And I picked it up, and it had my mother in it, because he had, as executor, he had had her cremated, and then had basically put her remains in the trunk of his car for about 10 years. It just sat in the trunk of his car. He never did anything with it. I thought, if something had happened to it, maybe he'd taken it up to her father's resting place in Idaho. But no, he had thought that he'd come to the realization that somehow having her remains in the trunk of his car was causing all of his bad luck. So while we were away, he put the remains in our basement. Got the housekeeper to let him in, put the remains. So I decided that something had to be done with this, and I put her, because she was a Republican, and anyway, I put her in a Tommy Hilfiger bag instead of the Penny's bag. I put her in the passenger seat of my Forerunner. I got a tape recorder that was voice activated, hung the microphone from the rearview mirror, and drove her to Twin Falls, Idaho, which is about a 15-hour drive, and had a one-way conversation with her all the way there and back, which is on tape. I've never listened to the tapes, but I still have them. So I did have this long conversation with my mother in this car ride.
So powerful, and what a great idea to do that for you.
I guess. I don't know whether it was cathartic or not. Like I said, I have the tapes, but I've never listened to them.
I don't know that you need to listen to them.
Yeah.
You could, and it may be something very different than what you remember saying, even.
More than likely.
Yeah.